This is Boxing Talk 8576, and this is not going to be a boxing video. It's going to be a response video to Carceno on the Chicago Bulls and the Detroit Pistons. I've been meaning to make a video like this for a while. I just never got around to it because I mainly talk about boxing on this channel. But Carceno had a video where he was talking about Max Kellerman and how Max Kellerman said when Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls were losing to the Pistons, Michael Jordan did not have an all-star next to him. And then when Scottie Pippen became of age and became an all-star and became good, the Bulls swept the Pistons. Now, I'm a Chicago Bulls fan. I grew up in Chicago. I seen all those playoff series that the Bulls had with the Pistons. I remember the Pistons being really, really good, a great team. I remember them always beating the Bulls. That's true what Carceno said, that they were always beating the Bulls, which is very, very true. In the playoffs, they always put us at the playoffs. They always eliminated the Bulls at the playoffs. And he said what Max Kellerman said was wrong. Now, I don't think what Max Kellerman said was totally wrong. This is where I really agree with Max Kellerman on this. Michael Jordan had no other all-star until Scottie Pippen made the all-star team and Scottie Pippen became of age. Because when Scottie Pippen first came in the league, what people don't realize is Scottie Pippen, he was a decent player in college. He wasn't this highly touted, you know what I'm saying, college player that's projected to be, really good. Scottie Pippen was a project. Like Horace Grant. Horace Grant became a better player as he became of age. And that's another thing, another element. The Bulls did not beat Detroit Pistons or really contend with the Detroit Pistons until Horace Grant became of age too himself. And Horace Grant was the power forward for the Chicago Bulls at the time. But anyway, they both was projects. Michael Jordan, when he first came in the league, he was like a one-on-one player trying to wield the Bulls, through playoff victories and during the regular season, trying to do everything himself. But you cannot win like that in the NBA. Especially back then, you had great teams like the Philadelphia 76ers, the Atlanta Hawks, Detroit Pistons, the Celtics. Milwaukee Bucks was good back then. I don't know, people, my age, I'm 40 years old, so people around about my age know how Milwaukee was a high-power offense back then. You had the Sixers, you had the Hawks, you had the Celtics, you had you had the Pistons, you had some great teams back then. You had the Cleveland Cavaliers was good back then with Mark Price and the crew. But the Bulls, Michael Jordan had the less to work with than any of those teams, in my opinion. Atlanta Hawks had Dominique Wilkins, and he had a pretty good supporting cast around him. He didn't have a great cast around him, but he had a pretty good supporting cast. I'm not gonna say that Michael Jordan had more than him, or I think they was on par. But the Boston Celtics was loaded with Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, Dennis Johnson, Larry Bird, Danny Ainge. You know what I'm saying? They had people coming off the bench that could have started for other teams. The Pistons had Adrian Dantley, Mark Aguirre, Isaiah Thomas, Vinnie Johnson, the microwave. They had a young Rodman, who was a tremendous defensive player. Even as a youngster, Dennis Rodman was a tremendous defensive player. They had John Sally. Man, they had some players, dude. I mean, you had other teams that had great players beside, really good players beside them that get them help. Michael Jordan had people like Will Perdue, Cartwright. Cartwright was a decent player. Cartwright wasn't an offensive player. He was a decent defensive player. He had a young Horace Grant. He had a young Scottie Pippen. Because by the time Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant came in the league, Jordan was like in his third or fourth year already. So Jordan had already been in the league for a little while. But that's who he had to work with. He was going to the playoffs with them, but the Bulls was getting swept out the playoff by Boston. Now, who wouldn't, if you come in the playoff series with a young Horace Grant and a young Scottie Pippen in their first year, and you go up against Boston Celtics, who got Larry Bird, Robert Parrish, you know what I'm saying, Dennis Johnson, and Kevin McHale, you're not gonna win that playoff series. It's just not gonna happen. And back then, basketball, to me, basketball was basketball. It was played on a more intelligent level back then. Those were men back then. Those guys went to college and they honed their skills, and they were able to come in the NBA not ready. I'm not saying they were ready to be all-stars right away, but they had the tools and they had the discipline and they had the fundamentals to become all-stars. You know, now these guys coming in with 1 or 2 years, maybe 1 or 2 years in college, and maybe coming straight out of high school, and like they did back like 3 or 4 or 5 years ago before they put in the one and done rule. You got to go to college 1 year, but they're not ready to win. They're not ready. They don't have the fundamentals. They don't have the they didn't go through the grind of, you know, college basketball to where you learn how to win. You learn how to, when you lose, then you learn how to make adjustments. These guys don't do that. They trying to come to the NBA, and the NBA coaches are not teachers. You know what I'm saying? A lot of NBA coaches are not teachers. They don't want you to come to the NBA to learn how to play. They want you to know how to play before you come to the NBA. I mean, that's just how it is. The NBA is like a microwave league. They want you to win right now. Fans want you to win right now because guys are getting paid. You know, when guys get paid these high salaries, fans expect them to win. But anyway, I'm going off topic. But he said, yeah, Detroit used to always beat the Bulls, but Detroit had a great team. The Bulls had a pretty decent, had a good team, and they started getting better year after year. But Detroit kept on knocking us out the playoffs. And I remember the series before the Bulls had swept them, the year before the Bulls swept them, the Bulls went 7 games with Detroit. And I knew right then that we had a chance to topple Detroit. We just had to mentally, see, Scottie Pippen had to mentally get together, because Scottie Pippen was afraid. Now, I don't know. I'm going to say he just wasn't mentally ready, and he didn't have the best come out of him against Detroit, because Detroit used to mentally, you know, cave him in. Mentally, like, they used to mentally mess with all the Bulls. The only one that mentally did not cave into the Detroit Pistons was Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was mentally tough. You know, Michael Jordan, they tried to, you know, what they did, hard foul Michael Jordan, throw him to the ground, any chance they got, you know, to limit Michael Jordan, you know, productivity. And they did not give up dunks to Michael Jordan, because, you know, like they said, that will make the team, you know, have a lot of energy when Michael Jordan is going off and dunking all over people and stuff. So they never let Michael Jordan even get a clean layup at the rim. He was always getting knocked down. And so they did it to Scottie Pippen them. Scottie Pippen and the other guys like Horace Grant, they were young. They didn't respond as well as Michael Jordan did to the physicality. So when Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant accepted the fact that it was going to be a physical series, that Detroit was going to be physical, they could mentally prepare for it. And the Bulls started, you know, I think the year before they even took them 7, I think that went 6 and stuff like that. So they went 6 and they went 7. And then in the 1990-91 season, the Bulls swept Detroit in the playoffs, 4-0. And this is where Carceno say, yo, okay, the reason why they beat Detroit, because Detroit was old and they were beat up and they were injured. I don't know if they were injured. I know that I can say they wasn't old, but yeah, they had some older players on their team. You know what I'm saying? Like Vinnie Johnson was like in his 9th year or something like that. At the time, I believe Isaiah Thomas was in his 10th year. Mark Aguirre was in his 10th or 11th year. Bill Laimbeer was in his 10th year. So yeah, I can agree that they were older, and they had been through wars, because they had been through wars with teams like the Hawks and the Celtics. And like I said, back then it was very physical. It took years off your basketball career back then. So yeah, he's right. They were old. I don't know if they were injured, but I just think it was a combination of the Bulls. They were a little bit older, and the Bulls were coming of age, and it was just the Bulls' time. Just like on the flip side, when Detroit used to play the Celtics, the Celtics used to always knock Detroit out the playoffs. If I'm not mistaken, the Celtics knocked Detroit out the playoffs 3 years as well. And Detroit had a good team, but the Celtics had a great team. You know what I'm saying? And that usually what happens when a good team faces a great team. The great team mostly is going to win, even definitely in the playoffs, like the NBA, like a 7-game series in the NBA. Usually the best team wins because it's 7 games. Anybody can win one game, like the NFL anybody can win that one game. But when you play a 7-game series, usually the cream rise to the top. And Detroit, when Detroit finally broke through, it's like a mirror. When Detroit finally broke through the Celtics, I believe they, if I'm not mistaken, they swept the Celtics. So I can say the Celtics were old, and they went through wars, because Celtics did go through wars. Celtics went through wars with teams like the Sixers, the Philadelphia 76ers, when they had Moses Malone and the crew, and Dr. J, when they had those guys. And they had wars with the Lakers when they were always going to the NBA Finals, facing the Lakers in the NBA Finals. And those were some physical series, mentally demanding series that they were going through with the Lakers and the Sixers and the Hawks. So I can say the Celtics were old when the Pistons beat them. It was a combination of both. The Celtics were a little bit older, and Detroit were better than what they were when they were getting knocked out the playoffs by the Celtics, and they were just ready to win. Same thing with the Bulls. When it was the Bulls' chance to beat the Pistons, when the Pistons was knocking them out the playoffs, it was a combination of the Bulls just was ready to win. They were prime, ready to win, and the Detroit Pistons got a little bit older. But Karceno will have you think that the reason why the Bulls beat the Pistons, swept the Pistons, is because the Pistons were hurt and they were old. That's not the case. That's not telling the full story. It was just the Bulls was ready to win, and Detroit taught the Bulls how to win. When Detroit were knocking the Bulls at the playoffs, the Bulls had to go on an off season and come back with a different strategy. When you lose, you can go back and you can find a lot of things that you need to correct. When you win, it's hard for you to go back and look within and say, I need to do this, I need to do that. You're going to keep on doing what made you win. But the Bulls were forced to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to beat the Detroit Pistons. And every year they came back, they got closer and closer. So you knew that they were making adjustments. They kept getting closer and closer to the Detroit Pistons until they finally swept them. Just like Detroit playing the Celtics. The Celtics made Detroit mentally tough and made them go back to the drawing board and made them get better. By losing to the Celtics and being in those tough playoff series versus the Celtics and learning game situations, the Detroit Pistons were able to go back to the drawing board and learn how to win. So when each year they kept on getting closer and close to the Celtics till they end up sweeping the Celtics. And I believe, I think it was it was a mirror, because the year before the Celtics, before Detroit beat the Celtics, they went to a Game 7. And then the next year, Detroit swept the Celtics. If I'm not mistaken, they swept the Celtics. So it was a mirror image. So, I know Karceno is a Pistons fan. He's from Chicago. He lives in Chicago. He's a Pistons fan. He loves Isaiah Thomas. I like Isaiah Thomas because he's from Chicago. So I'm going to support my Chicago, guy. But I couldn't go against the Bulls. I couldn't root for Isaiah Thomas, and he played for Detroit Pistons, and I'm a Bulls fan because Detroit Pistons were the enemy. So, so Karceno gonna make it kind of sound good because, he probably was a little bit salty that the Bulls swept the Detroit Pistons, because he has told stories about how when the Detroit Pistons used to beat the crap out the Bulls, on how he used to stick it to his family, because his family was Bulls fans, and how he used to stick it to his family. And then he said once the Bulls broke through and was beating the Pistons, his family started sticking it to him. So he gonna make it sound a little good like the Pistons was too old and injured. That's why they got swept. Now they got swept for a combination of different reasons. The Bulls was ready to win. They were a little bit old. I don't know about injured things.